Hello, reporter room investigators. Come on in, come on in. Today we're going to be talking about the Bryan Kohlberger case, and I caught something absolutely well. We need to talk about it. Come on in, tell me where you're from, and let's go ahead. And you guys know I like to get started right away. I'm not on camera today, I've been sick. And so I look forward to being back on camera in a couple of days, but I do want to get into this. So I do need to CYA myself. For those of you, come on in, tell me where you are from. My name is Jessica Della Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. Everything I'm sharing with you is my opinion, and opinions are not facts. Please don't send any negativity to anyone. All right, if you haven't subscribed to Reporter Room, it's free. Please do. Like, share, leave a comment. And today we're going to be talking about something I caught in the when I was looking at the university timeline. We're going to talk also about what Bethany Funk is going to testify to. But let's go ahead and get started. Let me pull this up. I have like 10 packages ready to go. So come on in and tell me where you're from. And Bryan Kohlberger is innocent until proven guilty. So we're going to start with Fox News. So let me pull that up. Take this down. Okay, so we're going to start off talking about a little bit about his job history, and I'm going to explain to you why this is so relevant to what I just caught and what I'm about to expose. Okay, so according to Fox News, Bryan Kohlberger's, and I just want to show the receipts on this. According to Fox News, Bryan Kohlberger boasted of his daily boxing routine. He described how he cut fish and worked as a meat wrapper. So he worked in a security job application obtained by Fox News. So he said he boxed every day at Jesse Harris Boxing Gym next to the Big Cheese Pizza when it was open. He said, I attended a year of law enforcement program and a year of HVAC, air conditioning, right? And we know why he had to change to air conditioning. But his employment history, and this is it right here. See if I can make it bigger for you guys. I don't think I can, but it's okay. I'm going to go through it. We don't really need to have it. So let's talk about Bryan Kohlberger and why is this important? Okay, so we know that he also added that he did some side work for his dad, who was a district maintenance worker. He says he learned how to do pipe work and HVAC, so that's air conditioning and heating work. So not only did Bryan Kohlberger know how to fillet fish, but he knew how to butcher meat. And therefore, in my opinion, Bryan Kohlberger was very comfortable with a knife. Now, Bryan Kohlberger ended up getting a job for the Pleasant Valley School District, starting out as a quote casual end quote security guard. And then he earned a promotion to part-timer. Now, the district outfitted him with size 13 boots, and so we know that he wears a size 13 shoe. Now, the idea that Bryan Kohlberger was in charge of student security in light of what he's been charged with is really scary. However, his employment came to an end on June 22nd of 2021, and this is where he submitted a resignation letter acknowledging, quote, I understand that if I do not resign, I have the right to a school board hearing to determine if I should be dismissed from employment with the school district. So in my opinion, he was fired. He was given the choice to either quit or be fired, but that's being fired. That's being terminated from your employment. Now, the school district declined to disclose any further information about Bryan Kohberger's departure. And I'm going to explain why this is so relevant in just a second. So please hang in here with me while I set the table. Stating that his employment records related to non-criminal investigation complaints, written criticisms of an employee, and disciplinary materials are exempt from disclosure under Pennsylvania public records laws. Now, records do show that Bryan Kohberger was placed on leave without pay for at least one day in February of 2021 due to a quote expired clearance and his resignation letter. In it, Bryan Kohberger acknowledges his right to a public hearing before he could be fired. So my sourcing on this is the New York Post. All right, so get this. Why didn't WSU pick up on any of this? Because a little over 1 year later, Bryan Kohberger would order the K-bar knife in the spring, in specifically March of 2022, a leather knife sheath, and a knife sharpener, all from Amazon. Now, my question is, why didn't WSU? This was a question I went into when I started investigating this. Why didn't WSU see this very disjointed employment history? And why would they hire him to be in charge of grading students as a teaching assistant? Because, in my opinion, his employment history was not stable at all. Now, let's talk about the fillet of fish. I always get comments when I talk about this, or even if I play the intro where I have a reporter talking about the fact that he had a job as a fish cutter. Now, a lot of people say, but he was fired because he wasn't any good at it. Well, let's see what Charles Conklin actually had to say, and this is from Newsweek. So let me share this instead. This is all about Washington State University, you guys. What did they know? What should they have known? And we're going to talk about Bethany Funk in just a moment. So please stay with me. Okay, so Washington State University. Okay, so Charles Conklin says, so this was somebody that they could have checked in on to find out about his job history, right? You're hiring someone to be in charge of grading students at your university. And his employment history doesn't appear stable. And I'm going to show you what I was able to find out very, very quickly. I'm unclear as to why WSU was unable to find this out and what liability should they have in all of this. There's something also that I caught that is really significant about the university and the type of power and control that they have in the town. So, in my opinion, his job history isn't stable. But this is what Charles Conklin said regarding the fish fillet job. He said, when kids come in here, their jobs are to keep the place clean, pick up paper all day long, help customers catch fish, fix poles, and then we train them how to fillet fish. And they get good at it. Then they can fillet customers' fish. Now, he said, but Bryan Kohberger wasn't around long enough to get to that point. He said, no, I learned how to fillet fish and I just want to say, I myself personally, I learned how to fillet fish when I was in first grade from my grandfather. So filleting a fish is not hard. For the people who come into the comment section to tell me that he was let go from his job because he couldn't fillet a fish. That's not what the owner, Charles Conklin, told us. And I just want to say that he just said that Bryan Kohberger wasn't there long enough to get to that point. Those were his words, quote, that point, whatever that point means. And Charles Conklin said that they parted ways with Bryan Kohberger after just 3 weeks. Again, why doesn't WSU? Why aren't they following up on this when they got his job application? So whether you think Bryan Kohberger was capable of filleting a fish or not capable, he also worked at a butcher shop, according to his resume, for 4 months. 4 months he worked at a butcher shop. So he worked for Big Brown Fish and Pay Lakes for a few weeks in 2011, not the 7 months that he claimed, according to the owner, Charles Conklin. And now on his application, and again, WSU didn't check any of this. They're putting this man in charge of grading students, but they don't check on some basic things. On his application, BK claims to have worked as a fish cutter from March to October. So again, why didn't the WSU simply follow up on this job application and confirm his employment? Bryan Kohlberger wrote on his job application that he, quote, I cut the fish to the specifications of the customer. He said the reason he left was, quote, needed one season, end quote. So according to Newsweek, Charles Conklin said that BK trained to cut and fillet fish using industry standard knives, but barred him from interacting with customers because BK was, quote, never warmed up and got friendly. So it sounds like Bryan Kohlberger was having interaction issues with customers. And again, this is something that WSU had a responsibility to find out more about what was really going on here. So it doesn't sound like Bryan Kohlberger was not capable of filleting a fish. Again, a first grader can do it. I know because I did it when I was in first grade. It sounds like he was unable to get along with the customers, and this is significant. And again, I caught something really important with WSU. We are going to talk about Bethany Funk in just a moment, so please stay with me. But in an appearance on News Nation, Charles Conklin said that Bryan Kohlberger only worked the job for a total of 20 days. 20 days he worked at his job. So let's just stay on this for a second. I have so much to unpack here. Okay, so practicing filleting fish for 8 to 10 days, that's plenty of time to get comfortable with a knife, especially if you're doing it for a full shift. We're talking about 8 hours, times 10 days, that's 80 hours. That's plenty of time to get comfortable with a knife. And so why was Bryan Kohlberger given the choice to either resign or be fired from this job? And again, why didn't WSU pick up on the fact that Bryan Kohlberger was not able to hold a steady job and had difficulty interacting with other people? Why didn't WSU know that he wasn't able to be friendly with customers? And why did WSU gaslight female students when they came forward to complain about Bryan Kohlberger grading them differently than men, following them out to their cars, blocking their path and forcing them to walk around him? Why did the WSU not stand up for the female students and instead demand that the WSU female students provide the university with more information? Because in my opinion, WSU did not do their due diligence in hiring Bryan Kohlberger. But wait, it gets worse because there is a date I'm going to tell you in just a second. So Bryan Kohlberger also claimed he was a champion extemporaneous speaker. And since Bryan Kohlberger did not attend high school in person, he was removed from his high school program due to some type of extreme problem, not suspended, not given detention. He was literally removed from the entire program and had to finish high school online. So why didn't WSU pick up on this? So Phil Wheeler, the vice president of marketing and communication at WSU, confirmed to Newsweek last month, this was back in 2023, that Bryan Kohlberger had received an appointment as a teaching assistant in the fall of 2022 for the fall semester, but, quote, does not currently have a teaching assistantship, and he's not currently enrolled at WSU. And wait till I share with you the date that they decided to let Bryan Kohlberger go. It is so significant. I just caught it when I was researching out all this. So Phil Wheeler declined to provide additional details, citing a law that prevents universities from discussing school records. So that's convenient. However, I believe the families of the victims and the female students who were being graded differently than males, and the female colleague who had to share an office with Bryan Kohlberger, where he tended and befriended her and got her key and broke into her apartment and installed security cameras on her behalf, but used them to spy on her inside her home. I want to know, I feel like they have a right to know why Bryan Kohlberger was hired and why they didn't confirm any of his employment history. So Bryan Kohlberger's time at WSU, he was known for misogyny among those he worked with and had a reputation for grading female students harsher than males. So let me share this. Hi, by the way.
Complained about
Come on in.
Kohlberger's rank sexism to the school, caused.
Can you guys hear that okay? Just a quick yes or no in the chat. Can you guys hear that? I'm going to play it for a second. I just don't want to play the whole thing and then find out you guys couldn't hear it. Yeah, can you hear it? Yes or no? Yes? Okay, thank you, Tori. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, and Jazz. Okay, beautiful. All right, thank you, thank you, Julie. Thank you for Anderson. All right, you guys are awesome. Thank you, Jolene. Appreciate you guys. I got a thumbs up from Betsy. And all right, so we're good. All right, good. Okay, we're gonna play this, and then I'm gonna tell you why this is so significant. What kind of power these universities really have. All right, so let me back it up a little bit. Just wanted to make sure we could hear it before I got through the whole thing and then find out.
Quadruple Idaho murder case. We have two significant developments. First, Bryan Kohberger's behavior at the school had been flagged by Washington State University. How? Sources closely involved in the case have told us that as a teaching assistant, he often made condescending and sexist comments toward women, that he was a harsher grader on female students than he was on men.
And just remember, they learned all this, WSU did, and did absolutely nothing. They told the female students they had to provide them with more information. They told WSU that this man was following them out to their cars, and WSU did absolutely nothing. And in my opinion, they did not check out his employment records thoroughly either. But let's listen, and I'm going to tie this up in a bow in 1 second. And there is a date that is so significant that I caught when I was researching all of this, and I'm going to share that with you and why this is like just absolutely terrible for WSU in just a second. So please stay with me.
That he would tell them they didn't have what it took and they wouldn't make it. They wouldn't get the jobs. They wouldn't be as good as men. So much so that several
and that's his name, Phil Wheeler, Vice President of Marketing and Communications. But he can't tell us anything. He can't tell us anything because it's against the rules. Okay. But Phil, why didn't you guys check out Bryan Kohberger's employment history? And if you would like to come on the show and talk to me, you have an open invitation.
Students complained about Kohberger's rank sexism to the school, caused WSU to conduct a harassment training seminar, according to somebody who had to be part of it. Kohberger was later fired from that job. So what happened in Moscow?
So he was fired from that job. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what happened, how it went down, but also the date that he was fired, which is really important.
Did not just come from nowhere. A proposition that is made absolutely clear by the next piece of reporting. A female WSU associate of Kohberger's confided in him that someone had broken into her apartment and asked Kohberger for advice on installing a home security system.
In my opinion, she has a good lawsuit if she wanted to file it against WSU, as do the female students.
We've learned that law enforcement is suspicious of whether Kohberger was the one who broke into his colleague's home and as to whether he used the surveillance equipment to stalk her.
Well, we now know that he did. We now know that he did. Okay, so let me take this down. Let's put this back up. Because this rabbit hole goes deep. And this is just such a big problem. We're going to talk about Bethany in just a second. So please stay with me. But I do want to finish talking about this because I just think this is so important. Okay, so just in case somebody's like looking, what are we talking about here? Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so we know that he made chauvinist remarks. We know that he was condescending toward female colleagues. He told them that women aren't as smart and that men were going to take their jobs. Now, this came from somebody associated with him at WSU. And then this female colleague, where we now know he used her cameras to spy on her. So Bryan Kohberger was dismissed, but not until he got into not because of what he did and was doing to female students. Oh no, he got dismissed because of multiple allegations of multiple altercations with a male professor. because he had, quote, not made progress toward professionalism. And I think it's worth noting that his termination letter with WSU, the letter makes no mention, zero, nothing of the allegations of misogyny, grading practices against Bryan Kohlberger. It makes no mention of the fact that he shouldn't have been following women out to their cars. It makes no mention of the colleague who he used her security cameras to spy on her. So WSU makes it sound like they were perfectly happy to have him go on his way and not put anything on the record to protect women. They didn't even stand up for their own other female teaching assistant. They didn't even stand up for their own female students. So the WSU cover up. Let's talk about that. So according to the New York Times, Bryan Kohlberger was investigated regarding his behavior toward women in the weeks before his arrest. This is according to the New York Times. Bryan Kohlberger was terminated from his position as a teaching assistant at WSU after school officials were informed about his behavior toward female students. But this really isn't true. This isn't really true. He wasn't. They were told, we know from Steve Gonzalez that these female students were told they had to write down days and times and get more witnesses. So he wasn't fired as soon as school officials were informed about his behavior toward female students. And again, mind you, this is important because they did not check his employment records. In my opinion, they didn't do their due diligence at all. So Washington State University knew that Bryan Kohlberger had behavior issues regarding female students. So why not put this into his termination letter? Instead, they claimed that Bryan Kohlberger was fired to not being able to meet the, quote, norms of professional behavior, end quote, as well as his unsatisfactory performance as a teaching assistant. Not a single word about the fact that he was grading female students differently than males. Not a single word that he was following women out to their cars. Not a single word that Bryan Kohlberger was making females feel uncomfortable. No mention of the fact that he had told the class that men were going to take women's jobs. Not a word of this was mentioned in the WSU termination letter. Why not? Instead, we're just told that Bryan Kohlberger had an altercation with WSU professor John Schneider, who he was assisting. So when he was harassing female students, WSU did not appear to have an issue with it. When he began harassing a male professor, John Schneider, that's when WSU suddenly had a problem. So following the reports that Bryan Kohlberger, and there is a point to all of this, following the reports that Bryan Kohlberger was fired from his teaching assistant position, Phil Weiler, again, that's the same Phil Weiler that we just talked about, the vice president of marketing and communication at WSU, told Newsweek that Bryan Kohlberger does not currently have a teaching assistantship, and he is not currently enrolled at WSU. But he added that he was previously appointed as a teaching assistant in the fall of 2022, and apparently with no basic due diligence, like calling his former employers. So when Newsweek reached out to Phil Wheeler about Bryan Kohlberger's behavior toward women, WSU spokesman Phil Weiler said nothing, no response, not a single word. Why not? Why not? And Bryan Kohlberger began to work as a teaching assistant in the criminology department as part of his graduate program. So now we're going to where Bryan Kohlberger is under investigation, right? So within a month, this is by Washington State. According to News Nation, BK was, and I just played that for you, he was already under investigation by the university because of his behavior problems and his sexist attitude toward women. Now, News Nation obtained a detailed timeline of his issues in the criminology department and revealed that Bryan Kohlberger was warned multiple times about his behavior and was brought into several meetings with professors due to their concerns. And his attitude toward women was cited as a key concern, with the criminal justice students alleging that he was being rude to women, grading women that he differently than the men, having a sexist attitude toward females that he interacted with at the school. But again, WSU didn't put this in his termination letter, not one word. In my opinion, they were covering up for the fact that they did not look into his job application. So it seems like within a few weeks of his arrival, there were a 5 alarm going off in the classroom at WSU that Bryan Kohlberger was bad news, but they kept him in the classroom. They continued to allow him to grade these young women. They continued to allow him to interact with these young women. All of these alarm bells are going off, and WSU does absolutely nothing but have a couple of meetings and doesn't immediately remove him from the program. If he had actually faced consequences for his behavior, would the crimes at 1122 King Road home even have happened? So let's go through this timeline with his professor, because this is the big reason that they're giving us. And then I want to talk about his termination date and why that is so significant. We're also going to talk about Bethany Funk and what she's going to testify to in just a moment. So please stay with me. But within a month, Bryan Kohlberger was already under investigation. And so it seems like, he was having problems. So now let's talk about these timelines, these issues with his professor, Professor John Schneider. Now, they had problems on just September 23rd. Bryan Kohlberger was called in to discuss his behavior again on October 3rd. Still not removed, not placed on suspension, nothing. But his behavior continued to escalate because, of course, he's not really being handled. They're not removing him. And we know that guys like this who commit crimes like this, allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty, but this isn't a courtroom. I'm not a judge. You're not a judge. We're not a jury. But his behavior only escalated with reports of him becoming increasingly belligerent and getting into arguments with professors in the run-up to the November 13th crimes. On October 21st, Professor Schneider emailed Bryan Kohlberger, told him he had, quote, failed to meet the expectations he outlined in their previous discussion. And coincidentally, October 21st is the day that Buddy the dog disappears out of his yard where he lived with Pam and Jim Colbert, just a little bit away from the 1122 King Road house. In fact, it was on the way from Pullman, Washington to the 1122 King Road home. On November 2nd, 11 days before the crimes occurred, Bryan Kohlberger met with his professor to discuss a, quote, improvement plan for his behavior. Again, he's not removed from the classroom. The WSU students were not being protected by this university. And I think that this meeting on just 11 days before the crimes would have absolutely enraged Bryan Kohlberger. Less than 2 weeks later, we know that Ethan, Xana, Maddie, and Kaylee were all done away with inside their home. Now, in the aftermath of what happened, WSU continued to note his concerning behavior. So he's still not fired. Now, they don't know, but get this, because the termination date is interesting. So Bryan Kohlberger attended a meeting with his professor about his improvement plan. Again, now we're into December 7th. He got into another altercation with John Schneider just 2 days later. So now we're to December 9th. So there were tons of warning signs that Bryan Kohlberger was not able to control himself, that Bryan Kohlberger had issues with females, that Bryan Kohlberger was making these young women uncomfortable, following them to their cars, blocking them in the doorway and forcing them to have to go around him, grading them differently than he did the male students. And WSU did absolutely nothing. They kept him in place until the end of the semester. Just let that sink in. And then when they finally did let him go, there was no mention of the fact that he was harassing female students. Not one word. But get this, his termination date is interesting. I caught this when I was doing my research. Okay, so guess what day Bryan Kohlberger is identified as a suspect by law enforcement? December 19th, right? Guess what day WSU is fired from his WSU teaching post, according to News Nation? December 19th, the very same day. And I think this is very interesting because this is the exact day that Bryan Kohlberger is identified by law enforcement as their suspect. So did law enforcement tip off WSU and they terminated Bryan Kohlberger prior to his arrest? Or is it just a huge coincidence? And I want to do a poll on this. I want to see if you guys see. So do you think it's that WSU was tipped off by law enforcement to terminate Bryan Kohlberger? Put a what in the chat. If you think this was just a huge coincidence and it just happened that law enforcement identified Bryan Kohlberger as a suspect on the exact same day that Bryan Kohlberger is terminated, put a 2 in the chat. So a 1 in the chat. Yeah, wake up. All right, so 1 from Barbara. Jen says 1. Steph says 1. Callie says, whoop. Callie says 1. And Jazz 1. Okay, so what responsibility do they have? Susan puts 1. Jules says, did any of the teachers put any complaints about BK? No, they never stood up. Only about the altercation with John Schneider. Not one word to protect the females. Not one word, you guys. Brother Mike says 1. Rebecca says 1. Jackie says 1. Eileen says 1. And thank you, Holly, for modding today. Crime Dog says 1. Christy says 1. Beth says 1. Maria 1. Jewel 1. Jen says, I think they did it over Zoom. Dana says 1. Totally tipped off. Christina thinks it's a coincidence. Leslie thinks it's a 1. So what culpability do they have in all of this? How responsible is the university for what happened to these students? How responsible are they for what happened to this colleague that he, had to share an office with this guy? They didn't check out his references. And Mike says, maybe police, in my opinion, allegedly, maybe the police talked with the college. They had a meeting online. He was told he would be fired, set for December 31st, but he was terminated on December 19th. DM's not sure. Anderson thinks it's a 1. JM says 1. PJ says 1. Not kick it. Can I kick it? Says not sure. Shannon says 1. 1 from Met. 1 from Mar. Jennifer. Okay. Donna thinks it's a 1. Sandy thinks it's 1. And thank you to our mods and Jazz, all of our mods today. Thank you, Bob. Willow says, I'm in spreading the word as much as possible. Yeah, he might be in the woods. Dave thinks it's a 1. And Malibu says that we're just seeing how greedy the universities are. Yeah, just remember that the crime scene was torn down by the University of Idaho. And now this. They suddenly just find this date. Mimi says, I don't think WSU would fire him. The police influenced WSU. Brother Mike said the school was not cool for the women students. Nope, it wasn't. You're right. Anna put a 1. Marianne put a 1. Imagine if you had a daughter in his class. Tennessee put 1. Laura says 1. So he wasn't let go till he had an altercation with a male professor. They did not care about the females. Afro a Troll put 1. Diane put 1. Barbara. So a lot of 1s. I saw 1, 2. I saw a single 2. Hey, this is our other head mod, 6 cents, Amelia. Thank you for modding today, Barbara. Justice for Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan. My heart goes out to the survivors. Yeah, if they had taken action, would this crime have happened? Betsy Ross put it a 1. And Jen says, even DeSales have pie on their face. He uploaded his Reddit survey on graduation day. Right, classes were over. And that's when he puts the Reddit survey out. So... And let's continue on. So he's fired. He is removed, ultimately fired from his teaching position. This is my new sourcing on This Is News Nation on December 19th. So this is the exact day that law enforcement identifies Bryan Kohlberger as a suspect, and that's when he is removed. Now, I don't know if that's the day they noted or told him, or whenever, if they notified him by mail or how they notified him. I don't know what day he received it, but I do know that this is the day that he was ultimately fired, according to News Nation. Now, big universities have a lot of sway in these towns. University of Idaho was allowed to literally tear down the crime scene. But let's get back to WSU, and then we are going to talk about Bethany. Okay, so now I want to go back to that WSU crime lab and the stuff they were claiming, because I I am not buying it. Let's look at what the crime lab says, because Phil Wheeler weighed in on this too. And I don't believe anything at this point. I think I'm not saying that he's lying. I want to be careful. I don't want to see why myself. I'm taking this with a massive dose of skepticism. So remember, I told you guys about this WSU Complex Social Interaction Lab. It's called the CSI Lab, and it maintains a database of body cam footage from 5 police departments, while other study operates a live feed of security footage from the WSU campus. So 5 police departments plus a live feed of security footage from the WSU campus. Now, WSU spokesman, that's Phil Wheeler, insisted to Fox News that Bryan Kohberger never had access to any footage from the CSI lab, but a whistleblower told the outlet that individuals on the campus may have had access to the database without authorization. So listen to what they're claiming, and then just juxtapose that with the fact that they did not do even some bare bones checking on Bryan Kohberger's resume. They didn't even check a little bit about his employment history. So just think about that, and then juxtapose that with what they're about to claim in this news article. So the CSI lab does not include footage from I just want to make this clear, from the Moscow PD. Okay. But we know from Steve Gonsalves that he thought Bryan Kohberger was calling in some of these noise complaints to see how long it took law enforcement to respond. Okay, but how easy would it have been to use this crime lab to hunt? The source quoted Fox News, this was a whistleblower who works for the university, speculated that Bryan Kohberger could have used the CSI lab to view unredacted images from crime scenes and other disturbing footage. Yeah, body cam footage and footage of students at WSU, female students. But here's Phil Wheeler again, WSU Vice President of Marketing. Notice it's marketing, you guys, and communication. So that's reputation building, told the outlet that Bryan Kohberger never obtained entry to the programs that maintain the footage. Really? Are you sure, Phil? So to be clear, Bryan Kohberger never had any access to any footage from the Complex Social Interaction Lab at Washington State University. And so my question is, how would he know that? I mean, Bryan Kohberger took a key from his colleague's apartment and allegedly went in and moved things around and took papers and a watch and put a cake in the microwave, enough to freak her out, and then Tinded and befriended her so he could install security cameras to spy on her. But we're supposed to believe that he couldn't have swiped somebody's access card to this CSI lab. He claims this is the same university that apparently couldn't be bothered to check Bryan Kohberger's employment history. And I bet we hear zero about this at the trial because, again, these universities wield huge power, in my opinion. But this is what Phil Wheeler says. Access to the facility is strictly controlled. All research assistants must complete a background check. Really? So research assistants have to complete a background check, but did you not conduct one on your teaching assistant, Bryan Kohberger? So this is what he's claiming. They all have to complete a background check, an FBI Criminal Justice Information Services Level 2 certification, be fingerprinted by the FBI, and signed a confidentiality agreement in order to enter the facility. But there's no way Bryan Kohberger could have swiped somebody else's pass to enter it. And do you really believe that this university was conducting background checks? And what is an FBI Criminal Justice Information Services Level 2 certification? I bet you it's just a little online course that they have to take and they get a certificate. Were they really fingerprinted by the FBI? And if this all happened for their research assistants, why didn't this happen for Bryan Kohberger as a teaching assistant? He's a teaching assistant. They have all these high standards for people to access the CSI lab, but no standards for people to enter the classroom to grade other students. in a leadership role, a teaching assistant role. But the insider, this is the whistleblower, said that multiple individuals who have not gone through vetting or training did have access to the facility as part of their duties, including technical support staff. So again, here's a whistleblower telling us the truth. And Phil Wheeler is, he's in charge of marketing and communications. And this is just my opinion, Phil. So don't come for me. So the prospect of Bryan Kohlberger gaining access to the footage raised concerns for the whistleblower who told the outlet, "I don't think that any amount of positive research that comes out of this department is worth the risks of letting a wolf in the henhouse." And I want to know if you guys believe Phil Wheeler. Do you believe that there were all these standards in place for this crime lab? Put an A in the chat if you believe it. Put a B in the chat if you think that's just nonsense, that there were no standards in place. I just want to know what you guys are thinking about this. Put an A if you think there were standards. Put a B if you think there were not standards. I just want to know what you guys think. B, no standards from Leslie. Eileen thinks B. Jewel says the hospitals, anyone can work in them without a mental health assessment. Enjaz, thank you for modding today. Enjaz is our other head mod with Brother Mike. And Six Sense Amelia, she put in a B. M, Barbarossa, B. Susan B. Christy Valentine, B. Tennessee, B. Jackie, B. Carla, B. Grave, Crime with Grace, B. Dion, B. The Jewel says B. Dana says B. Jennifer said, yes, I believe there were standards in place, but only standards were to deny and conceal anything that goes wrong. Thank you. I agree with you, Jennifer. This is just so huge. Betsy, B. Steph, B. Jen says standards, B. Tell the university, not law enforcement. Crime Dog, B. 0. All you need to do is catch the door as someone exits. Exactly. Ben Bet says B. Butterfly says B. Donna says his professor, B. So very, very interesting. Eileen thinks it's absurd. Jen says yes. Donna put a B. Anna says, I wonder if the officer that gave the university a heads up also leaked information to Dateline. I don't know. There wasn't a gag order at that point, to be fair. So I don't know, but very interesting. Jen says yes. Babs puts a 2. Steph says, I wonder if the university was short-staffed and cut corners. Yeah. But not when he had an altercation with a male professor, right? Just only the females. And we're going to talk about Bethany Funk in just a second. I do want to say thank you so much to Patricia for gifting a reporter room membership. If you received that, please let Patricia know that you are grateful. And I am grateful. Thank you so much, Patricia. You can let her know. Thank you. Susan put is a new member. Welcome, Susan, to Reporter Room. And Jazz gifted a Reporter Room membership. How wonderful. Thank you so much, Njaz. Shannon says $5. Super sticker. Thank you so much for the $5 super sticker, Shannon. She says Ted Bundy became a vegetarian in prison. Also said he felt humiliated by women. Very interesting. I did not know about him becoming a vegetarian. Thank you for sharing that. Patricia gifted another Reporter Room membership. So that's 2. So we have Patricia and Njaz with Reporter Room memberships. If you received that, please make sure you tell them thank you. Let me see what else we have. Eileen, thank you for the $9.99 super sticker. Thank you so much. That is really, really kind and generous of you guys. And Shannon says, on November 13th, Bryan Kohlberger's ultimate control over females. I agree. I think this is the motive. Texas Life Julie, welcome to Reporter Room family. I'm so glad. Welcome as a Reporter Room member. And Donna, thank you so much for the 99-cent super sticker. That is so nice of you. And thank you for the $1.99 super sticker, Brother Mike. That is so nice of you. Thank you guys all so much for your kindness. Okay, so let's continue on because I have been digging for a couple of days. That was one of the good things about me being sick. I didn't have energy for very much, but this kept me going. Okay, so I think when we're looking at this WSU crime lab, I think we can all agree that WSU did not check out Bryan Kohlberger's references, right? Let me know if you disagree, but I think we could agree that WSU did at least didn't do a thorough job of checking out Bryan Kohlberger's references. That's number one. Number two, I think we can all agree that WSU did not protect its female students in a timely manner. They told them they had to gather more information and find witnesses themselves rather than the university doing the investigating into it and putting him on probation in the meantime. Number three, I think we can all agree that WSU did not remove Bryan Kohlberger from its program until he had an altercation with a male professor. So I think we can agree, again, there was no protection by this university for its female students. So I want to talk about this WSU crime lab and the fact that he got this key to his colleague's apartment where he allegedly broke in. He got the key out of her drawer. He shared an office with her, took some papers, and then when she was scared and freaked out, he offered to install security cameras inside her home, and then he used them to spy on her. So we already know that he's perfectly capable of taking a key that does not belong to him. So are we supposed to believe that Bryan Kohlberger would not have taken a key or a card to get himself into the WSU crime lab? Because this whistleblower said you don't even need that. And we're supposed to believe that there was all this rigmarole that people had to jump through, the FBI certification, which sounds really fancy, but I bet you it's just an online certification from the FBI. It doesn't sound like they were doing background checks into their teaching assistants, let alone a thorough background check into Bryan Kohlberger. I mean, come on. So what an awful thing. So WSU told Fox News that Bryan Kohlberger was not part of the program, but students can apply to the CSI lab by filling out an online questionnaire. So he could have applied he was a teaching assistant. He could have simply picked up someone else's IDs. Remember the IDs that were found inside a glove, inside a box? They weren't his IDs. Whose IDs were they? So, this is this whistleblower trying to sound the alarm about a fox being let into the hen house and giving the fact that this university was giving people easy access to body cam footage. And we know from Steve Gonzalez that he believes that it was Bryan Kohlberger making some of the noise complaints at the 1122 King Road home to see how long it would take law enforcement to respond. But here comes the WSU spokesman to Fox News. He says, to be clear, this is Phil Wheeler again, Bryan Kohlberger never had any access to any footage from the complex social interaction lab, that's the CSI lab at WS State University. So how does he know? How does Phil know that Bryan Kohlberger stole a key from a colleague he shared an office with? He installed her security cameras to help her, used the security cameras to spy on her. How does Phil know that Bryan Kohlberger did not access the crime lab? In my opinion, there's no way he could know. We know there were IDs found inside a glove, inside a box. Whose IDs were they? Do they link back to students at the 1122 King Road home? Do they link back to WSU students, maybe future targets? But Phil Wheeler, he just wants everybody to know that all research assistants have to complete a background check, but not teaching assistants. Is that what we're supposed to believe? That there's a FBI Criminal Justice Information Services Level 2 certification. Again, I think this is a little course. If you've ever done a job and you have to do a little course online to take the job, maybe agreement. So my question is, why didn't WSU do any of this before they hired Bryan Kohlberger as a teaching assistant? He had medication issues. He did have an arrest when he stole his sister's cell phone. And I think if they had gone through and actually contacted his past employers, they would have known that Bryan Kohlberger lied on his job application. When female students from WSU started coming forward to say that making sure you guys can hear me. I just got a message. Can you guys hear me okay? Just a quick yes or no. It was expunged, but I mean, the press could find it, the media could find it. You can hear me? Okay, good. I just didn't want to go all the way into thank you, Christy. Thank you, guys. I didn't want to like dive into all of this and then find out, oh, no, we couldn't hear her. Okay, because I have done that before. All right, so so in an email to the Post. Now, this is to the New York Post because now we have all these journalists are digging into all of this. So I think that the fact that they didn't even do the basic due diligence on Bryan Kohberger's job application. If they had contacted his past employers, they would have known he lied on his job application. But they hired him anyway. And it just makes me really not believe that they had all these checks and balances in place for this CSI crime lab with access to 5 different police department body cam footages and access to camera footage from the campus. But WSU hired Bryan Kohberger, and even after those female students came forward, that would have been a great chance to go back to his job application, trying to find an excuse to fire him. Did he lie about anything? But nope, they didn't do that either. Nope, they didn't do that. They waited until December 19th. That's the date, according to News Nation, that they let him go from his job. I don't know if that's the day they notified Bryan Kohberger, but that's the date that they put out that they let him go. And I just wonder if they were tipped off by law enforcement, because December 19th is the exact same day that law enforcement found out that Bryan Kohberger was their suspect. So I think that's just my opinion. But WSU did nothing to protect female students. And they've had no consequences. They didn't protect. I mean, Bryan Kohberger, this teaching assistant, she had to share an office with this guy, and they didn't even do a criminal background check on him. An FBI absolutely should have been able to see if he had an expunged record. If the journalist can find out that he had an expunged records, I am confident the FBI could. I think that Phil Wheeler is just using the FBI as cover, in my opinion. So I'm just don't think it's a coincidence that WSU let Bryan Kohberger go on December 19th, the exact same day that we now know that law enforcement identified. And the only reason we know that that's the date they identified Bryan Kohberger as a suspect is because of a motion from Ann Taylor trying to suppress the AT&T records. And the prosecution had to explain, but we didn't, that wasn't within the 7-day window with the AT&T records because we didn't know he was a suspect until December 19th. So now let's go to the Idaho Statesman. It looks like the school administrator had ruled out everything except harassment. So let's talk about this. This again, this would have been just something so easy for the Washington State University to be able to know. So Bryan Kohberger was kicked out of his high school. And again, if journalists could find this, if they're really doing FBI background checks on this, then surely they would have seen this, right? But, okay, so this is about the incident that Tanya Carmela Beers labeled as pretty serious in an interview with a podcast. And she wouldn't say what happened, but she tells us everything that it isn't. So in a way, she kind of does tell us what it is, right? So let's go back and relook at her statements. This is what I like to do as an investigative journalist. I like to take new information and then juxtapose it with older information to see what little nuggets can be found out. So we know that Bryan Kohberger was removed his sophomore year from the law enforcement focus at Monroe Career Technical Institute in Eastern Pennsylvania. And she confirmed this with an interview with the Idaho Statesman, which is my source on this. Okay, so why didn't the university check anything, like even check his high school? Why would somebody switch from law enforcement to HVAC? But she oversaw the technical school's student mental health and discipline, and she reiterated that she could not divulge the details of the incident. However, she said it was not medication or alcohol related. Okay, so we know it's not that, not violent in nature, and it didn't involve academic integrity or cheating issues. So we know what it's not. And this was serious enough that he wasn't just suspended. He wasn't just put in detention. He's literally removed from the whole program and has to complete high school online. So, in my opinion, it's probably related back to issues with females. Because she wouldn't say what the specific interactions with BK were. But she said that the general circumstances that could lead to a student's removal against their preferences from a technical school which had heightened requirements. She said ultimately, so she has to be careful what she says. She doesn't want to get sued. What had him removed from the program, when I look back on it now, makes sense. Okay, so she's looking back on this, knowing that he's been arrested for doing away with Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana. This article is updated on March the 28th, but it was put out before that. So she knows that, right? So she knows he's arrested. So she says, ultimately, what had him removed from the program, when I look back on it now, makes sense. She said, in light of the doing away with allegations, not knowing what I know then yeah, you'd be like, I can't, I'm so shocked. And in that respect, I am. But yet I know another little piece, which is the piece that occurred at the school. And then I'm like, oh, but see, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I think that is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So she tells us now it makes sense. So let's get back to WSU. Okay. So it was something to do with females. So again, I think that just a bare minimum of a background check, checking his employment history. And when they started getting complaints from females, that would have been a great opportunity for HR to immediately start going through his employment to see if he lied on anything on the application. In other words, could they find an excuse to get rid of him? But they didn't do that. Instead, they tell these poor female students that they have to they have to provide witnesses to, his behaviors and document everything. And they have to continue to be subjected to his grading in the meantime. But Tanya Carmela Beers tells us that in light of the crimes, that it makes sense. So there were warning signs that emerged after Bryan Kohberger joined this law enforcement program at the county technical program. So again, if WSU had done their due diligence and called and checked out his resume, wouldn't they have found some of this out? And we're going to talk about Bethany Funk in just a second. But here's another missed opportunity. If they had made a few phone calls after they started getting complaints about Bryan Kohberger from female students, they would have immediately picked up on what they failed to do initially, which is the fact that he has a very unstable employment history. If they had made a few phone calls, they would have learned that Bryan Kohberger had issues with females. If they had made a few phone calls, as soon as they started getting complaints from female students, they would have found out that Bryan Kohberger lied on his job application. And maybe he would have faced some consequences then. And maybe this poor young woman, this colleague who he befriended, stole her key, used her installed security cameras to help her. And I have bunny ears quotations around the help her, and then used them to spy on her. Maybe that wouldn't have happened to her if they had just done a little bit of due diligence. If they had listened to their own students, maybe they would have removed him from his teaching assistant more swiftly. But instead, he was not removed until December 19th of 2022, the very day he is identified as a suspect by law enforcement. So let's talk about Bethany Funk and what she's going to testify to. Okay. I get a lot of questions about this. So I just want to clarify this. So Bethany Funk is one of the two surviving roommates, and she saw something. So I'm using the Mirror as a source, but this is not the only one that reported this out. This was just one of the first ones. But Ann Taylor heard about it, and she was concerned too. So this Richard Bethany is a investigator for the defense team. He is working for Ann Taylor. So she has her own private investigator. So she subpoenaed Bethany to appear at his hearing on June 28th. This was the preliminary hearing that was supposed to happen back in 2022. We now know that that preliminary hearing did not happen. It did not happen because they went to a grand jury instead. So Bethany Funk didn't want to appear, but listen to the affidavit. According to the affidavit, Bethany Funk witnessed a man without something on running through a rear sliding door. Now, she lived on the first floor of the home and came face to face with the person who committed the crimes. I don't know if she came face to face with him, because a lot of people think that she may have actually seen him outside of her window and not through the sliding glass door. But Ann Taylor heard about this and wanted to talk to Bethany. And I have people say that Bethany didn't cooperate, and she did. By the way, it's going to be Kaylee Jade Day on June 8th. That's her birthday. If you guys want to do something to commemorate her. So Bethany is alleged or heard things that the defense thought could clear Bryan Kohlberger. This is what Mr. Bethany argued, that Bethany was a crucial witness. And his attorneys claimed that Bethany had exculpatory information that is material and necessary to his defense, to Bryan Kohlberger's defense. Now, Bethany refused to appear. Maybe, and people wonder why. Maybe she didn't want to help the defense. Maybe she didn't want to have to travel back to Idaho. She didn't live in the state at that time. But if she refused to appear, maybe she didn't want to agree to appear because she knew there was a grand jury already. She testified at it. And so she knew there was no preliminary hearing. I don't know what she was thinking, but she refused to appear, and then they threatened her with a fine or 25 days in jail. And Mr. Bethany wrote in the affidavit that during the course of my investigation, it's become known to me that she has information material to the charges against Mr. Kohlberger. So what is Bethany going to actually testify to? I'm going to tell you what I think in just a second. But according to police, it was Miss Funk who found her housemates, but she's now disputing the request to appear, as she now lives in Nevada, not Idaho. And her attorney wrote, there's no authority for an Idaho criminal defendant to summon a Nevada witness to an Idaho matter without a hearing. There is no authority to summon a Nevada witness to an Idaho matter without a Nevada judge making finding of materiality, necessity, and lack of undue hardship. So in my opinion, she didn't want to go back. She probably didn't want to help Bryan Kohlberger, and she didn't want to help the defense team. But also, I think she knew that this grand jury had already happened because she testified at it. So she knew that she wasn't going to be appearing at a preliminary hearing, but she couldn't say that because she's stuck under this gag order. So Bethany Funk has a legal team, and they rejected this as a foreign subpoena. And then the defense demanded that Bethany provide testimony, and they tried to challenge the probable cause. Okay, so they were all in on wanting to talk to Bethany Funk, the defense team. I think we can all agree on that. But get this. So Bethany Funk does ultimately agree to meet with them. There's a lot of confusion about that. I have people come into the comment section all the time and tell me that Bethany refused to meet with them. She did initially, but she ultimately did agree to meet with them. And when she met with them, they heard whatever it is that Bethany is going to testify to. And then Ann Taylor filed a motion that she did not want Bethany to testify at all. She filed a motion to suppress, which is prevent. And remember, if Bethany's testimony really exonerated Bryan Kohlberger, then Ann Taylor would be all in on having Bethany testify. But she doesn't want Bethany to testify. And that's because although I think Ann Taylor originally thought that Bethany could, help exonerate Bryan Kohlberger, it's also possible that she, found out that what Bethany was going to say. So this is what Bethany, I believe, is going to testify, and I don't know where she saw it. Namir thinks it's the sliding glass doors. I'm not so sure. That I think she did see something, and we heard the judge say in a couple of hearings ago that Bethany was going to testify to seeing someone drop something in a bag. So I think that she saw a man on November 13th, either outside her front bedroom window, remember her bedroom at the front of the house faced the front, or did creep up the stairs to take a peek. I don't know. But I think she's going to testify that she saw him stripping off a coverall and dropping it into the bag. Now, if there was something on under that, I don't know. But I think that she was taking off the coverall. We know from his how-to essay that he, would have known to wear a coverall, you guys. So I think but as soon as Ann Taylor found out what she actually saw, then she did not want Bethany to testify. So I want to clear that up because I think it's important. Facts matter. And this picture right here, this iconic picture that I talk about all the time of Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, Xana, Bethany, and Dylan. This was posted by Kaylee in the hours before she was done away with. So Bryan Kohlberger, who was following Kaylee and Maddie on Instagram, and Kaylee posted this on Instagram, would have known that Kaylee was in town. He would have known that Kaylee was in town. So I think what Bethany is going to testify to is she's going to testify that she saw someone, and it's going to connect. The prosecution is going to connect this with the how-to essay that Bryan Kohlberger wrote on how to commit a crime. Yeah, please don't use all caps in the chat, you guys. So I do think that is really, really interesting. I want to say thank you to Valerie for the $9.99 super sticker. Thank you so much. Valerie says, where am I? Valerie says, always look forward to your videos and lives. Thank you, Jessica, and take care. Thank you so much, Valerie. That is really nice of you. I appreciate the encouragement, and I'll be putting all of the super chats toward editing equipment. Didi, thank you so much for your $3 super sticker. I really, really appreciate it. Leslie, thank you so much for the $9.99 super sticker. That is so generous of you. Thank you so much. Dee, thank you so much for the $1.49 super sticker. This is so generous. Thank you so, so much. And Jess, thank you for gifting another Reporter Room membership. And Per Anderson, thank you for the what is SEK? SEK. Let me look up what it is so I say it right. SEK, do I say dollars or do I use another word? I'm just trying to, what word do I use? Swedish, kroner. Okay, so I guess I say dollars. Okay, it sounds like, thank you for the $200 kroner. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Am I pronouncing that right, you guys? That is very, very kind of you, Per Anderson. Thank you so, so much. Okay, so unpacked a lot of stuff, and Bethany is going to be testifying. So let's think about what she's going to be testifying to. She's going to be testifying about finding the roommates for sure. She's going to be testifying about the 911 call. She's going to be testifying about probably why they didn't call 911 sooner. But I also think she's going to be testifying about seeing this man drop things in a bag outside her window, which is what Ann Taylor thought would exonerate Bryan Kohlberger. Or maybe Ann Taylor knew it wasn't going to exonerate Bryan Kohlberger, but it made it look like, more conspiracy. I hate to say this about Ann Taylor. So, but, maybe it's just another way to have a conspiracy. Let me know what you think. So I do want to say, we're not done, but I just want to say thank you so much to our producers, and Jazz, Sasha Angel, George Brown, Pepper, and Christy Valentine. Thank you so much to our channel members. I just updated this yesterday. If I left anyone's name off this, or maybe it was actually it was earlier today, please let me know if your name is not here. I'd rather have you let me know than not let me know, because and if you would like to join and have your name appear just like this, hit the join button. It's next to the subscribe button. Subscribing is free, and then channel membership is just a couple of dollars. So it's definitely worth it. You have your name appear just like this. You get a check mark next to your name as a verified channel member. And we do our own channel member live streams. And I do want to do a super thanks and coffee gratitude from our last live stream. Thank you so much for your kind and generous support. And thank you for your gifted channel memberships. Again, if I've left anybody's name off of this, please let me know. Drop me a comment, not in the top chat, but in the comment section below so I can make sure to add you. All right, so let's talk about Bethany Funk a little bit more detail. So we know she saw a man. We know she saw him taking off something. We know she's from the judge, because it's the judge who said that she took off something and dropped it into a bag. We know she's going to talk about the 911 call. And we know Ann Taylor did not want her to testify. So let's go through this together. Let me take this down and add this in. Okay. So this is why surviving roommate. This is Meow. It's a blog. Never saw the aftermath, but we so this is why why she didn't see anything, but she didn't see the victims. But I think we just don't know how much she saw, but we do know that the victims' families, a source close to the victims' families, have revealed that Bethany Funk did not witness the crime scene and that she never went upstairs. I think she may have gone to the second floor. I don't know if she went into the rooms or not, but I don't think she went up to the third floor. This is according to Ashley Banfield. She said that she left home and was outside in the chaos of the front of the house, but never did go in to that second floor, never did see the carnage. Citing a source who has not been named, she wasn't part of the discovery of the Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, or Maddie. She was the only one living in the basement at that point. Well, she knew something horrible had gone wrong, but I don't know exactly what she saw. We're not going to know exactly what she saw till she testifies. But it was Dylan that saw the man wearing all in black. And she also heard a male voice. And I think this, kind of harkens back to what Dateline reported out and what I reported out over a year ago about the WSU student and those security cameras that he was using to spy on her. But this is what made this a capital punishment case. It helped. It was another aggravating circumstance. Dylan heard a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." And she froze and then locked herself in her room. And then we know she went downstairs to be with Bethany. So I think the fact that he was, offered to help her is really diabolical in light of what we know happened to Ethan and Xana. So I don't know if he was talking to Xana there or if he was talking to Ethan, but he was definitely trying to get closer so he could do what he was going to do. And then I just do think that is a, big problem for Ann Taylor and her defense team. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Grunger said he may have changed out of the clothing out front, but maybe he parked closer to the Queen Road and not behind the house. A lot of people have wondered that, Grunger, if he maybe, I think he stripped off that coverall and then dropped it into a bag. And I do think he, had a bag. I don't know if he left it by the door or if he had it in his hand the whole time. Lumberjack says, if you happen to be in the chat, hi from Carson. DM says, please smash the thumbs up button. Thank you so much for modding today. Susan says, what? Somebody saw him changing clothes? Yeah, Bethany saw him. And Chris Ann says, wow, if Bethany saw him removing the coverall, that's unbelievable. Yeah, and I think that's why the prosecution is working so hard to, and did manage to get in that how-to essay. The judge is letting that in because it ties up in a bow what Bethany saw. Bethany saw someone taking off something and dropping it into a bag. And I think that the how-to essay talks about a coverall, that a fiber-free coverall, and it helps explain why there wasn't a lot of transfer. And I think it's also really easy to Dexter out your car. Dynamite says he was doing blood spatter mitigation when she saw him. Exactly. Malibu says, those beautiful young people, evil monster. Jennifer said, I believe that if Bethany Funk had seen someone at the back door removing clothing, she wouldn't have tried to tell Dylan. She wouldn't have tried to tell that maybe she saw Xana in the house and maybe she was also wearing all black. Well, we don't know all the timeline on everything. But I don't know. That's a great point, Jennifer. That's a fair point. But I do think she is going to testify to seeing somebody outside the door dropping it all into a bag. Callie said, if Bethany saw him taking something off and placed it in a bag, where did she see it, and how if she was in her bedroom? Well, her bedroom faced the front of the house. So let's look at the 1122 King Road home and look at where Bethany's room was. I'm just going to pull it up really quick for those of you guys. I don't want to assume everybody knows this house backward. Those of you that have been with this channel for a good long while know that. Okay, so this is the house. And you can see my understanding is that Bethany's room was here. That this is where Bethany was. So if she had looked out her front window, she would have been able to see something if he parked over here, or a lot of people think he parked over here. So we don't know yet, but that's what has been reported out, and I do think it's worth noting. Jewel says, thank you to the mods. Yes, thank you to our mods. Mods, come down and drop me a comment so I can shout you out. This is our other head mod, Six Sense Amelia. Leslie, no politics. Yeah, please don't do politics. I try to keep this like a politics-free zone. Just, I know everybody has their political feelings. That's fine. But we want this to be comfortable for everybody, no matter what their political affiliations or are. The Willows says, anyone know where BK's car was parked? We don't know for sure. We saw it do a 3-point turn and then park, but we don't know with 100%. Love it or leave it says, does anyone wonder if he dyed his hair in that bathroom selfie? A lot of people have asked that about his hair. Let me just back it up. I don't know if it was dyed or if it was just wet. I'm not really sure. I don't know why he would have dyed it. Teaching assistant is still a student, right? But does have the power to grade other people. So not just a student, right? If you have the power to determine somebody else's grades at a university, and if you get, a certain GPA, you can be removed from your whole program. So failing somebody is really serious. Rebecca says, interesting because it has been rumored that Bethany Funk saw something for a long time. Well, she did. And we know this because Ann Taylor, whatever she saw, does not help Bryan Kohlberger, because she did not want Bethany Funk to testify. After all that rigmarole with her private investigator to hear what Bethany had to say, once she heard what Bethany had to say, she decided she did not want Bethany to say it to the jury. So she filed the motion to suppress or prevent the jury from hearing that evidence. Christy said, I blame Bryan, not any universities or anyone, because he's a lunatic. Well, I'm not saying the university is responsible for what he did, but I am saying that they absolutely could have removed him sooner. There were all kinds of red flags, and they did not do it. Blayton says, Reno, Nevada here. Thank you from Mrs. Layton. Thank you. Oh, is it B. Layton? I've been calling you Blayton this whole time. Can I kick it? I thought it was just like how people have really cool names. I just thought it was a new cool name. Can I kick it? Says the time of year was winter. My hair always gets darker in the winter. He looks really pale. And thank you, Enjas, for modding today. Thank you, Holly, for modding. Thank you, Gal, for modding. Thank you, Brother Mike, for modding. Faraday says, another channel shows the possibility of Bryan Kohlberger parking on the side where Bethany's room was the most possible. I thought it was in the back, but it looks like he parked on the side next to her bedroom. Right. So she would have been able to see that. She just wouldn't have known what she was looking at the time, right? She wouldn't have known what she was looking at. But in light of what they found upstairs the next morning, she would have had a better idea. Chris Ann says, no wonder Ann Taylor didn't want Bethany to say what she saw. It's a drop the mic moment for sure. The prosecution against the Koberger. It's no wonder there's more information than we know about. Thank you for modding today, Christine. Space Junkie says, always pay attention to what is said at the beginning of the case like this. We are seeing rumors confirmed. Yeah, that's why I love going back. That's like something I do. I go back through everything and I juxtapose new information with old information. And then try to figure out, like the WSU, I was wanting to know why didn't they let him go sooner. And the more I dug in and more about the CSI lab, because I just really am skeptical about this whole thing of that. There's no way that he could have possibly had access to the lab. I just I'm just not buying it. And then to see how bad of a job they did on his resume of confirming anything. And then once the complaint started rolling in, that was a chance for the WSU to come forward and go through the resume, find out something he lied about. Because everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people lie a little bit on the resume, right? They might overlap something by a month, whatever. It could be an excuse to get rid of him, but they didn't get rid of him. They kept him on. Thank you for modding today, Mike and DM. Thank you for modding. And Brother Mike and Njaz are both our head mods along with Sixth Sense Amelia. And we're going to be doing the case of Lily and Jack next. Thank you for, and Mod Max. Wicked is modding today. Thank you so much. Dion says, AD, was that the light that was out? By the way, the apartments. Jordan says, hi everyone, always listening, but I do think she saw him as well. We don't know exactly where everybody parked yet, the Willows, but law enforcement does because they have those cameras. And they've also talked with DoorDash delivery and they've cleared the DoorDash driver. The jewels, and here's the other thing I just want to share. I just want to say thank you to the mods because, man, you guys are just the best. Thank you for modding today, Kathy, Holly. So now I lost my train of thought. I hate it when I do that. Donna says, can you imagine if the jury finds him not guilty like OJ? It's scary. It's scary. Amy says, I believe he put something on his hair to protect it from falling out and possibly losing a hair along with a head cover. Oh, very interesting, Amy. Wow, that's a really interesting. And the Jewel wants to know, was the university short-staffed? I don't know. It was, right around the pandemic time, so maybe they weren't checking everything. But here's the thing. Once they started getting the complaints from the female students, that's when HR should have immediately gone through the resume and looked for a reason to get rid of him. Instead, they just kept him until he actually got into an altercation. And what is an altercation? An altercation is more than an argument, but less than a fight, like a physical fight. It's somewhere in between. So it was, something egregious that he did, but it wasn't until he got into an altercation with a male professor that they decided, oh, well, now we'll remove him. And I think that's really sad too. It doesn't, people always say, well, why don't the victims come forward? Well, this is what happens when they come forward. They have to worry if they're going to be graded differently. This guy, even though they came forward, he was still in charge of grading them. He could still give them whatever grade he wanted to give. And then they just look like that they're just being spoil sports by coming forward. Once they came forward, that's when the university had an obligation, in my opinion, to take action. And they did not do this. Yes, thank you to Mods Are Us, Mod Squad. Christy says, my pleasure. Mods Are Us. Hey, Jessica, thank you for hard work. We do appreciate you. I appreciate you too, Kathy. Thank you so much. And Cougar says, I just want to know why the cops done such a sloppy, quick job at investigating this. They really should have done a better job. And don't get me started with the house being torn down. Well, I actually think I have a different take on it. I think law enforcement did a really thorough job on investigating this. I mean, the Moscow Police Department did some really incredible things. They knew that they had not had a crime like this in around 8 years. Nobody had been done away with in 8 years, which says, a lot for Moscow, Idaho. And they knew this was like beyond. So they immediately brought in the Idaho State Police and they immediately brought in the FBI. And then they worked with the WSU campus police and they worked with the Pullman police. So I think law enforcement did a good job investigating this. That's my take. But if you have a different one, that's okay. We don't all have to agree. So, I'm not saying you're wrong and I'm right. I'm just saying that's my take on it, which is a little bit different. But Jules says, yeah, if the university has standards and protocols, they should have enacted them right away. Right. If they have all these standards for their crime lab, their CSI crime lab, then where are the standards for a teaching assistant? Why not a background check on that? Why not at least do a basic resume check? Nancy said, what about the unknown DNA under Xana's fingernails? It was Maddie's fingernails. And Ann Taylor filed a motion to suppress it. So that's the defense team did not want that to be let in. The prosecution wanted to let it in. They wanted to talk about it. The defense team said they did not want it to come in, and so it is not coming in. Betsy says they have the option to take it federal. Yeah, so guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. If you would like me to continue covering this case, please consider subscribing. That lets YouTube know that I'm doing a good job. It also helps me out. And please consider giving this a thumbs up. And if you drop me a comment below, I will for sure read. Thank you so much for coming by to spend a little bit of time with me. I'm sorry I'm not on camera. I am sick, but I did not want to cancel this live stream because you guys are really important to me, and fulfilling my obligations to you is really important to me also. So thank you so much for everybody, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one and seeing you guys